we put in a floor, if you will.
Okay. And you're...
Sorry, just before you proceed, we noted media have arrived. Is there any of your officers or yourselves object to media being in the room? Any of the colleagues? There have been none.
Chair, I don't think they're here for witnesses. I think they're here for Senators.
It's only because Elvis is leaving the building today. You need to be careful that you take no part of your photograph would allow or identify any artefacts in front of the witnesses or particularly the contents or titles of their documents. Thank you. Sorry to say.
Thanks, Chair. So your inquiry is still going, and we'll sit back and see what happens.
The review is still underway, Senator.
So the review, I should say.
The public comment period, if you like, the responses have closed. We've got 910 responses. We're evaluating those at present. We're hoping that, therefore, we can put that together with a range of other material, and we'll be in a position to make a supplementary submission to the Senate inquiry before the end of the year, because we thought that might assist. And I know your inquiry, I think, is due to complete in December, and we're working very diligently to see whether we can have some information which might help inform your inquiry as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Chair, that will do for
Thank
now.
you. There may be some benefit in before either this committee or our report's about to be published. So there just may be some use in us getting together prior to the publication of results to the extent that they can be harmonised and that our recommendations can support where you're heading, Mr. Carmody. I think the committee would well receive the opportunity to have a further discussion, perhaps through a private briefing to the committee. Senator Xenophon, but before we do, there's a great degree of sadness at the table here that this committee may never see you again.
You know there's a penalty for misleading the Parliament.
So the word is you're either going to be murdered or commit suicide before the sun sets today.
I don't know if that's an appropriate terminology, but this will be my last estimate.
But can I say, we've enjoyed working with you, Senator Xenophon. I think I can say on behalf of...
You may not say that by the end of the day today.
I'll just refer to Senator Steele to add to that, but we wish you all the very best in your endeavours in whatever life brings. Senator Steele.
Thank you, Chair. All I can say is it's been an honour and a privilege, Nikolai. You've started many inquiries, many blues. I'm still waiting for you to fix a couple, but anyway, we will miss you, but no doubt we will see you through our parliamentary careers before they end in one way, shape or form, and we hope our paths cross regularly.
Thank you.
Appreciated working alongside.
Now, the truth of the matter is we're all happy to see you go. Leave it at that. Senator Xenophon, you've got the call.
Some more than others. Mr. Carmody, time is limited. I just want to go, you said earlier, and I wasn't in the room, but you said earlier that it's important that CASA applies the rules in a consistent and fair manner in terms of enforcement.
That's correct, Senator.
You stand by that. I just want to go to the issue of Dominic James, the pilot at the centre of the Pellair inquiry, and you're very familiar with that. He's at a point, Mr. James is at a point where he's ready to move from co-pilot of a Falcon Jet 2 pilot in command of a multi-crew flight. And by the way, I have permission from Mr. James to raise these issues. There's a question as to whether CASA is imposing unreasonable requirements on him before they will permit him to be endorsed as a pilot in command. There's a standard form recommendation. You're familiar with the standard form recommendation. And through you, Chair, I might just seek to table a copy of that in relation to Mr. James's.
All right, so can the Secretariat help us by providing a copy to each of the senators, and then we'll make a decision.
Got a few copies here.
Senator, while you're doing that, consistent with my previous testimony, it would be my preference not to deal with cases of individuals in front of the committee, but if you so wish, I'm happy to respond.
Thank you. Well, I'll put a few things. These documents. Can I make it clear? These documents were obtained through FOI, so it's not as though they were classified documents, and they've been obtained through the proper FOI process. There's a standard form recommendation, and Chair, I seek leave to table it. It's a document obtained through the FOI process. I can give you.
Well, you can present it to me, and we'll circulate it, and then we'll make a decision on table and send it in accordance with the procedures.
And perhaps if Mr. Carmody could be provided with a copy of that form, Chair. Could Mr. Carmody be provided a copy of that? No? Could Mr. Carmody?
Yes, of course. I think that's.
You've got a copy of that form?
I haven't
right. Well, there's
got a copy of the form you're referring to.
Thank you.
The burden of the question and your response to the senator, not having had a chance to read the document, this relates, I imagine, to an incident that obviously has one or more persons identified in the incident. And Senator Carmody, Mr. Carmody has indicated a reluctance to speak around the specifics with an individual. Now, if we rule, you'll have to do that. It's a public hearing.
That's fine, Chair.
I think you'll see the course of my questions very shortly, and it goes to issues of appropriate process, and this is an example where
All
I
right.
don't
Well,
think
you're
appropriate
well aware of the
process has been followed.
sensitivities, Senator Xenophon, so
Right.
you have the call.
Well, it is a sensitive issue. The standard form recommendation, as I understand it, is a document relating to adding references to a license, a flight crew license condition. Is that right? How would you describe it?
It's a recommendation that might have many functions, Senator. In reality, it's a standard. It's a way of combining information to a decision maker like me. A recommendation for us to take a particular course of action. So it might not be licensing. It could be anything.
Sure, but the normal course is that for the document to be a valid document, it ought to be a signed document. Is that right?
Yes, that would be reasonable.
Right, and that's in terms of the appropriate. My understanding is that this document was not that a recommendation was made, but it was not signed off on. In other words, are you satisfied? And you may want to take this on notice that the standard form recommendation in relation that I've referred you to is appropriately executed so as to be a valid document.
Senator, I'd have to take no notice. I haven't got the document. I don't know the date of the document. So
I'm happy for you to take that on notice, but I've got concerns as to the validity of the document in relation to that. Now, this document relates to Mr. James having to take a proficiency check prior to being able to act as a pilot in command of a multi-crew aircraft, and I provide you with a copy of that. It's a form signed by Mr. Roger Chambers, but I note that it is not. My understanding is it is not properly endorsed. So, are you able to confirm that, or do you need to take that on notice?
I'll take that on notice, Senator.
Right. So, I need you to advise whether it's an appropriately endorsed form, and can you confirm whether the form, whether the recommendation of Mr. Chambers has been actioned or not?
I understand a condition was put on Mr. James's licence many years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I haven't got the detail in front of me. Maybe about 5 years ago, that a condition was put on his licence. I believe his air transport pilot's licence was suspended. My colleagues might be able to correct me if I'm not correct. And a condition was put on it.
Right.
He retains his private pilot's licence and commercial pilot licence.
Right, but this appears to be a new form in addition to the conditions applied previously. Is that your understanding?
I haven't got it, Senator.
So if
I
there's a
don't
new
know.
form, I might ask you on notice as to why there is that. I've got access to an internal CASA email, again through the FII process, that reveals that an official is having regard to the draft ATSB report in his handling of Mr. James' proficiency check. Is that something that is allowed under the Transport Safety Investigation Act?
Senator, well, I haven't got the information, so I'm not
But
in a
as a
position
general
to
principle,
comment.
leaving aside Mr. James's case, can CASA take into account under the Transport Safety Investigation Act, and in particular I think there's section 2632, can they actually have any regard to any draft report in making a decision?
I wouldn't expect so, Senator, but I would expect that there is a lot of material about this, of course, because there's a previous Senate inquiry and there's a previous ATSB report on this matter. So again, without being able to investigate, I'm not really in a position to say.
No. Well, can you answer this? It's a basic process issue. If there is a draft ATSB report...
If it's a draft interested parties report, Senator, which is just out for comment, I would expect that would have no bearing.
Okay. And it seems on the face of it that it is having a bearing on the decisions made by CASA, given that there was an email from Malcolm Campbell of the 6th of October 2017 to Fred Vander Hyde.
But the decision to put the condition on Mr. James's licence is 5 years ago, Senator. I don't believe the condition has changed. Unless my colleagues can explain differently, I understand that condition was placed on it some time ago and has not been varied.
Well, can I put this to you? Noting section 12AA3 of the Transport Safety Investigation Act, why are CASA officials utilising a draft, utilising an ATSB report to determine how to deal with a pilot, and noting sections 26 of the Transport Safety Investigation Act, why are CASA officials utilising an ATSB draft report to determine how to deal with a pilot?
Senator, I can only respond because I don't know whether they are or not. My expectation, as I said, just to make it clear once again, the conditions were put on this licence 5 years ago, to my knowledge. Those conditions have not changed. There is a draft interested parties report that was circulated about the Pelair matter to interested parties, including us. We get to comment on an interested parties report, as does Mr James. I'm not aware that that report would be used in consideration of Mr James's case, because I would say that the conditions that are on Mr James's ATPL or on his licence are the same conditions that have been on it. And I have no consideration. I would just go on to say that I've had approaches from Mr James about removing those conditions in the last 4 weeks, 3 weeks. Those conditions have been in place for 5 years. The ATSB report is due to be handed down in 3 weeks. I'm considering the approach to Mr James, but I will not make a decision until after the ATSB report is finalised.
Just for the sake of